you have never learned how to forgive. The average person has never learned how to forgive. They've only learned how to lie about what's really going on with them. And the issue with that is that when you have created a life, when you have built a marriage, move this out the way. When you have built a marriage on the image of being strong, then you built an idol and not a marriage. The inability to forgive is a real dire issue amongst our culture. And oftentimes we think we have forgiven or we think we are forgiven and we're really not. So the thing is, the average person has never really learned how to forgive. They've only learned how to lie. And if you've never learned how to forgive, that means you've never learned how to love, because you cannot love absent of forgiveness. The two have to coexist as one. Love and forgiveness are married to one another, like husband and wife. You cannot love something, you cannot love your spouse and not carry forgiveness for them or towards them, because love is deeply tied to grace. And if there is no grace, there can be no room for forgiveness. And so many times people are sitting in marriage and they are stewing in bitterness, stewing in unforgiveness, swimming in holding on to things. And so you can never learn how to love until you've mastered forgiveness. And you don't know love until you have first been introduced to forgiveness. Because it's only until you recognize how terrible you are or how bad you've messed up, and then after that, receive forgiveness, it's not until then you can really understand love. Let me explain that again. It's not until you mess up so bad that you feel like there is no coming back. It's not until you do something so terrible that you feel like you'll never be able to move past it. It's at that point where you receive forgiveness. And at that moment, you know what love is now. Before that, you have no idea what love is. And marriage is built on the two becoming one, meaning love and forgiveness becoming one action. You forgive because you love, and you love into forgiveness. So even if you don't feel like forgiving, you forgive because so much love is in you, you cannot help but to let it go. And to let it go means you don't deal with it or bring it up, because you have officially let it go. So now that was a little bit of recap from last week. Any questions about that? Now, let's jump into this. It's hard for you to stay married because it's easy for you to get offended. It's hard for you to stay married because it's easy for you to get angry. It's hard for you to stay married because it's easy for you to get frustrated. The easier it is to get you disappointed, the harder it is for you to stay married. The easier it is for you to get bitter, the harder it is for you to stay married. The easier it is for you to get irritated, the harder it is for you to stay married. The issue we're having oftentimes within ourselves is that we're struggling with internal issues that we want to extend to our partner, but the truth is these are issues within us. And one of the easiest ways to avoid healing or accountability is to cast the blame to someone else as if they are the 100% cause for everything that I say, do, feel, and think. When that's just not the case. I would actually say that oftentimes whatever you feel towards your spouse, that is just something that you've always felt towards the person who hurt you the most before your spouse. You just never really dealt with it, or you never really said anything. Remember, when people get married, the spouse often becomes the greatest punching bag for all of the stuff you wish you had said or did to someone else. So anytime you get angry and bitter and frustrated and disappointed, you don't know that it's subconscious stuff. You don't know that it's suppressed stuff. You don't know that these things are rooted deep in you. I often used to wonder, why is it that we take out on the person that is nice to us or treats us well? Why do they take out on us the things that they do, right? I said wonder. I meant to say wonder. My wife is DMing me. But the thing is, I often wonder why, like, because this is something I noticed all through high school, college, early years, that when people treat you right, it's easier when you're treating people right. It seems easier for them to treat you bad, or it seems easier for them to get angry at you or frustrated with you or short with you. Anybody else experience that or witness that rather? And yeah, and it's almost like how is it that how is it that I'm treating you well? I might not be flawless, but I'm treating you pretty well. I do right by you, to a degree, maybe 5 days out of 7, right? Whatever. I'm being funny, but the question is, why do these things happen, right? And it's almost like, man, this becomes such a struggle. So it's hard for you to stay married because it's easy for you to get offended. Think about that statement. It's hard for you to stay married when you're easily frustrated, easily disappointed, easily let down, easily offended, easily angry, easily irritated. So realize this: your marriage becomes a reflection of your relationship with God. Your marriage becomes a reflection of your relationship with God. Let me show y'all a couple of things. Let's go to Matthew 5. Let's go to Matthew 5. Matthew 5. Let's look at Matthew 5. Let's look at verse um 21. We'll start at verse 21. Think about it. Watch this. Verse 21 of Matthew 5. You have heard that it was said of those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be in danger of the judgment. Remember, this is Jesus talking. But I say to you that whoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. And whoever says to his brother, Raka, shall be in danger of the council. But whoever says you fool shall be in danger of hellfire. Now, here's where it gets interesting. This is where we're going to apply it to our call tonight. Verse 23. Therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go your way. Is this the New Living? No, it's not. Sorry, I meant to read the New Living. Were y'all understanding the New King James? I always want to make sure people are getting it. Okay, everybody good? Okay, all right. I switched over to the New Living now. Verse 23. So if you are presenting a sacrifice at the altar in the temple, and you suddenly remember that someone has something against you, leave your sacrifice there at the altar. Go and be reconciled to that person. Go and be reconciled to that person. Go and be reconciled to that person. Then come and offer your sacrifice to God. Now, how do we apply that in today's context within marriage? Well, what Jesus is referring to is whenever you bring something before the Lord, whether it's worship or praise or prayer or money or gift or offering, tithe, whatever it is, the principle is don't bring something before me and there's something going on that is unresolved with your brother or someone that you are in partnership or covenant with, right? Now, the principle is if you're in covenant with somebody, deal with that before you bring anything to me, because, and now in this case, it'll be marriage, right? In this case, it'll be marriage. And so your marriage is a reflection of your relationship with God, right? So within the confines of forgiveness, right? Understand that God values reconciliation and God honors peace. God values togetherness. So the truth is, unforgiveness is hindering and can hinder and will hinder your connection with God. Let me be honest with you. If you are withholding forgiveness from your spouse, your prayer life is on pause, no matter how much you're praying. All your worship, all your praise, all your giving, all that stuff is because unforgiveness hinders your marriage. It hinders your relationship. So there's no way your relationship with God can be unhindered when you have unforgiveness towards your spouse. So you cannot think that your prayer life is actually, let me say it a better way. You cannot believe that your prayers are being entertained by the Lord when you have not reconciled with your spouse. You have not forgiven your spouse. You have not dealt with the issue between you and your spouse. It's important that we understand these things because all marriage is a reflection of God's relationship with humanity. And so the Bible says in 1 Corinthians 13, verse 5, love keeps no record of being wronged, which means anytime you keep a record of being wronged, you are hindering your marriage. Anytime you don't let go of yesterday, you are the holdup in your marriage. Anytime you cannot let things go from yesterday, you are the hindrance of your marriage. Anytime you cannot forgive yesterday, you are the issue. One of the biggest challenges in relationships, especially marriage, is dealing with offenses, dealing with someone's past mistakes or current mistakes, or dealing with unresolved conflict that you feel should be resolved, yet it might still be happening, or whatever the case may be. And so many couples, especially in marriage, they struggle because of the relationship and marriage struggles because one person can't let the past go. They can't get over what you said. They can't get over what you did. They can't get over whatever it may be. And so let's kind of dig into this. Like, what does it really look like to keep a record of being wronged, right? What does that really look like? Now, again, if I can say this, we are not telling anybody to ignore or overlook abuse. We're not telling anybody to never deal with the hurts or the offenses that have taken place. We're not saying don't hold each other accountable. We're saying make sure that forgiveness is a byproduct of your nature, which means you let go of the past issues and mistakes once they've been addressed. Because it's about choosing grace over revenge, grace over grudges. That's a t-shirt. Grace over grudges. So whenever your partner fails, whenever your spouse fails, whenever your significant other fails or struggles or is hindered or misses the mark, you have an option to either focus on that or let it go. Like, you have that choice. You have that option. The issue of forgiving comes down to this. You might have a fear of being hurt again. Because you might say, well, they keep doing the same thing. You might have a desire to be in control. You might have unresolved emotional pain. You might have a bunch of different things going on. But when a person keeps a record of wrong, they're holding on to past offenses as a defense mechanism. It's their subconscious way of holding control over you. Because of what you did to me, and if I know you care or if I know you love me, I'm going to use that to show you you can't do that to me. So I'm going to find a way to use what you did against you in return, which is a form of psychological revenge. And what it is a demon convincing you to go after your spouse because of what they did to you. The problem is that you're letting a demon talk to you, number one, and you're letting a demon tell you what to do, number two, and three, you're letting a demon get in the way of your relationship with your spouse. Now, as a believer, we're not in the business of talking or confiding in or counseling with demons. We don't spend time listening to devils, and devils should not be counseling our marriage. Now, what a devil will do is cause you to hyper focus on how you feel. Now, again, I'm not telling you to ignore how you feel. God is not telling you to ignore how you feel. What we're saying is don't hyper focus on how you feel above moving towards reconciliation in a healthy manner. If someone did something to you last week, if your spouse did something to you last week, that should not really be brought up a week later. That shouldn't be brought up 2 weeks later. Because that is in the past and it should have been resolved weeks ago. Now, if you bring it up 2 weeks later because you never brought it up or resolved it, then so be it. But that's a bad pattern. That's a bad habit you're creating. Sometimes things are just a byproduct of bad marriage habits. But another reason why people keep records are wrong is because they desire control. Because bringing up the past can be a way to manipulate or guilt trip your significant other into doing what you want them to do. Because you want them to feel bad for what they did, you use it as to your advantage to get something out of them. But the problem is the Bible says love does not demand its own way either. You shouldn't be using your spouse's mess ups against them in a manipulative way to get something out of them. That's an immature thing. That's an issue within yourself. Now, for many people, this third thing is where a lot of people really struggle, which is the unresolved emotional pain that comes along with the hurt that caused this or that leads to the unforgiveness. So when a person hasn't fully healed from a past wound, a past offense, a past hurt, what's going to end up happening is they're going to replay it in their heart and mind over and over and over again. And I think that's where I would say majority of people really kind of deal or live in. It's that place where you recognize that as you think about it over and over and over again, or if somebody does it more than once or twice, you're going to hyper focus on it. Is this making sense to anybody? Now, okay, amen. Now, keeping a record of wrong will destroy your marriage because it leads to bitterness. Now, I don't know how many of y'all heard me teach this before, but I think some of y'all have. The Bible says to everything there's a season and a time. All right. Matter of fact, I'll pull it up. I'm gonna go to Ecclesiastes chapter 3. Why isn't my Ecclesiastes chapter 3? There we go. Finally, y'all, you acting like you got some sense, computer. It wasn't bringing up the parallel Bible. All right. So, Ecclesiastes chapter 3, to everything there's a season, a time for every purpose under the heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill, here we go, and a time to heal, a time to break down, a time to build up, a time to weep, a time to laugh, a time to mourn, a time to dance, a time to cast away stones, a time to gather stones, a time to embrace, a time to refrain from embracing, a time to gain, and a time to lose. You get the point. Now, here's the thing. In verse 7, it says, a time to mend. A time to mend. A time to mend. So there's a time to tear and a time to mend. Now, the tear is within a different context. So the mending part is the only part that applies to marriage in principle. Now, if there's a time to mend, what that tells me is whenever an offense takes place, pay attention, whenever an offense takes place, you have a certain amount of time per offense to forgive it. Pay attention. You have a certain amount of time per offense to forgive it before bitterness sets in. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Because when we talk about bitterness, you have to understand how dangerous bitterness really is. Because bitterness is such a poison. Bitterness is such a poison. So I'm gonna go to Hebrews chapter 12 to show you, and then I'm gonna connect it to Ecclesiastes chapter 7, a time to mend, which is basically a time to forgive. Now, watch this. When you look at Hebrews chapter 12 and you go down to verse I'm gonna start at 14. It says, work at living in peace with everyone. In this context, it's about your spouse. And work at living a holy life. For those who are not holy will not see the Lord. Now pay attention, watch this. Look after each other, so that none of you fails to receive the grace of God. Listen, watch out that no poisonous root of bitterness grows up to trouble you, corrupting many. Bitter people corrupt their home. Bitter people corrupt their marriage. The question is, where does the poisonous root of bitterness come from? Well, if you do not forgive in a certain amount of time, bitterness sets in and it becomes rooted in you. The other day, my wife brought me an onion because the onion started to sprout a root, because the onion was in a baggie and it thought it was in the ground. So because of the time frame being in the bag, it began to sprout. Now, I'm going to try to use that as an analogy. Same thing with potatoes, right? The thing is, if you don't deal with an offense or pain or hurt by forgiving it in the due season, you have the grace to forgive, it's going to root itself and grow up into bitterness. And what's going to happen is you're going to be the most dangerous person to live with, to be around, because bitter people are the most dangerous people to be around, because the effect they have is subtle. It's not like a murderer chasing you with a gun. You know what to expect. It's not like a murderer chasing you with a knife. You know what to do. You got to fight. But when you're around somebody who is quiet or silent or passive aggressive, and they're bitter and they're dangerous and they're harmful, and you have no idea what they're thinking, you have no idea what they're capable of, that is a dangerous person. And oftentimes it's our spouse, because they never really forgave. Now imagine not just one offense you haven't forgiven, not just two, not just five, but imagine 10. For every hurt and pain and offense that you do not forgive in a certain amount of time, it turns into bitterness, which means a person can have 10 different roots of bitterness from 10 different situations that they never forgave. Because according to the Bible, you have a time to heal and a time to mend. Now, how did I connect this to? Years ago, God gave me a revelation. I went into like a vision, or I was studying, if I remember correctly. And I went into this like, I don't know how to explain it. It's hard to explain. But I went into this thing, and I was kind of just stuck, and I was seeing. And God began to show me, when you don't treat a wound, it'll get infected. So whenever you get a wound, a cut, an abrasion, a bullet wound, whatever it is, you have a certain amount of time before it gets infected. When you have food, you have a certain amount of time before it goes bad and you have to throw it out. Well, what happens if you don't clean the wound? What happens if you don't heal the wound? What happens if you don't take care of the wound? It gets infected. And when it gets infected, the infection takes over your whole body, and your whole body begins to shut down because your organs and stuff cannot function with infection. The same thing with food poisoning. If you don't eat the food in its time, if you don't eat the food in the amount of time allotted to before it spoils and you eat it, it's going to cause you to be sick. So the issue is when you don't forgive in time, it becomes bitterness. And now getting rid of bitterness is much harder than getting rid of unforgiveness, because bitterness is unforgiveness on steroids. Unforgiveness is on the surface. Bitterness is at the root. Is this making sense to everybody? So now you're keeping score because of bitterness. You going tit for tat because of bitterness. And the worst part about it is you a liar. Ain't no wrong with me. I let that go 2 months ago. No, you didn't. Your actions betray you. Your speech betray you, Peter. So now, on top of the bitterness, something else happens, and now you unforgiving about that. And instead of being able to cover these things with love and communication and grace, you then turn it into bitterness and reopen more wounds. How many times you gonna bring up your past, your spouse's past failures? And we all guilty of it. But not exactly. Yes, but not always. So if I am easily offended by something my spouse says, more than likely that offense that I'm feeling is connected to unresolved trauma. Now, you also mentioned not being able to handle your emotions. Now, that's a separate conversation, because sometimes you're not offended. Sometimes you're just frustrated or upset or disappointed during the conversation because of other variables. So part one, if I'm easily offended at something my spouse is saying, then something about what's being said is triggering unresolved trauma in me, or unresolved pain, or unresolved issues. Part B, if I'm having a hard time containing my emotions during a conversation, I might not be getting offended. I might just be getting mad because of a few different things. We've already talked about this, and you said you was over it. It could be like you tried saying it 10 different ways and it's not getting through. You might be getting frustrated with yourself. So the emotions thing could be 100 different things. But I just want to leave it there. Does that answer your question?
Very much so. Yeah.
Okay.
That was good. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, because the thing is, when a person gets offended when something is being said, the question is always going to be, well, why does that offend you? And they might say, well, you're being inconsiderate, or you're being unloving, or you're being harsh, or you're being whatever it may be. And then the question is, well, why are you receiving it harshly, or why are you receiving it in the manner of which you're receiving it? Because at some point, when we get to enough whys, we got to get to the root of why this is happening. And that's kind of the whole, reason why we got to ask the question of why. But I think we're in a culture of our time. We're in a generation now where offense is simply just, let me say it a better way. Offense is like ice cream, and it comes in many different flavors. It's almost like people choose they choose their flavor of the month of offense. And we're in a culture now to where we have developed weak people emotionally. And we have to turn the corner on this, because we cannot always save somebody's feelings, because every human being has to mature to the point where you can recognize the difference between honesty and negativity. You can recognize the difference between real talk and offense and bitterness, or whatever it may be. So I just think we're in a climate to where, outside of our marriage, just in our climate and our culture in general, we've developed this. How do I want to say it? We've developed this skin that, okay, I know how I want to say it. We've developed this idea that if I feel something, then it must be validated. And the truth is, there is no rule book to where all your feelings got to be validated. There are times where you just gonna have to sit in your feelings and grow up. There are times where you just gonna have to feel what you feel and grow up. Let me ask y'all a question. Okay, I see it now. I just scrolled down.
Okay.
Appreciate you.
Yes.
All right. Sometimes if I bring up the past, I'm trying to get clarity regarding whatever the action was. Is that a red flag for not letting it go, perhaps? No, not exactly. Great question. There are times, now, it all depends. Are you bringing it up with animosity in your heart, anger in your heart, frustration in your heart? Then that's a sign that you did not let it go. But in your question, it sounds like you're simply bringing it up because you thought about something and you want to gain clarity in regards to the action so that you can have the knowledge for the future. Is that correct?
Correct. Just to kind of either find out what was the intention, what led you to that action, and things like that. So,
Yeah, that's simply gathering information. That's not holding on to the past, because gathering information helps you to, in the future, handle things a lot better, understand things a lot better. It would be different if you were saying, hey, I still be angry, so I bring it up to get clarity. Well, that's not the case. In this case, you're saying no animosity, no ill will, no anger, no bitterness, no frustration, no disappointment, no letdowns. I'm simply trying to gain information based on something I thought about. And that's all. That's a good thing. Great question.
thank you, Pastor.
No problem. Great question. And so when it comes to keeping records, right, that's going to lead to bitterness, and it's going to lead to resentment, and it's going to create a toxic cycle of defensiveness, of deflection, of guilt tripping, of shaming, etc. Because the thing is, when one person is keeping track of everything, of what the other person has done, right? You're going to find a way to, even if it's subconsciously, to shame them or make them feel bad. A spouse can say, a spouse can apologize because they forgot, I'm gonna use a cliche just for example. They forgot your anniversary. They forgot the spouse forgot your anniversary. And so now, you saying like, well, I don't ever forget our anniversary. That's because I care. See, that right there, that's that shaming tactic, right? That's that resentment, that bitterness. It's like when you do that, matter of fact, let's stay here. How many of y'all struggle with that? Where you throw little things in there, the kind of like, in a subtle way, even if it's not to shame, but you say little things to kind of hint towards something that offended you or something that affected you. Like, my question would be, what's going on in your heart that leads you to that? Because I want us to heal from this. So the floor is open. What's going on in your heart? Let's talk about this, because people do. I'm a firm believer. Nobody holds unforgiveness because they willingly want to. Nobody does it because they wake up excited to do it. So let's just give each other grace in that area. Nobody's holding unforgiveness because they want to. But when you get into that place where, we're bringing up stuff to kind of remind our spouse of what they did wrong or how they hurt us, even though it's in the past. Anybody want to come up mute and talk about that? Where we learn to communicate more and better. Because here's what we do. We try to exert energy where we should be exerting communication. For example, if I want my child to grab the orange and bring it to me, if I want my child to grab an orange and bring it to me, my job is to say, hey, son, go into the kitchen, grab an orange, and bring me the orange, please. Here's what it looks like to overextend. You pointing, no, there, and then you sit up, no, over there, and then you get up and walk almost close to the kitchen. No, right there, like grab that thing right there, that, yeah, the orange. You see the difference, Car? Where my communication can give me everything I need. If I don't have the other person doing their part, it forces me to feel like I have to get up and do more because they're not doing it. And so here's what I'm telling everybody. Stop overexerting your part. You must make your spouse meet you. Now, let me give a caveat. Amen, Car. Am I saying you shouldn't go the extra mile at times? No, that's perfectly fine to go the extra mile at times. But when you make it a habit or a lifestyle to let someone else underproduce, you're going to develop an imbalanced relationship. And that's where we start trying to control things. But before I go off on a tangent and teach something else, let me reel it back in, because that's a whole nother lesson, whole nother teaching. The emotional unavailability comes with a few things. It's the emotional boundaries, the walls that go up, the inability to share how you feel or what you're thinking, making somebody figure it out, like all of that stuff. That shouldn't be taking place in marriage. The inability to make a commitment or keep your word, like all of these different things, the hot and cold behavior, like all that stuff is just that shouldn't be happening. But if it is, we have to talk about it. I will say this. Communication is one of the underutilized tools in all relationships, because people have a lot of trauma. Let me say it a better way. When you have trauma that causes you to act, it causes you not to communicate or practice communication. So, for example, one thing I did this is what I did for years. I'm gonna take y'all into my life for a second. One of the things I did for years was practice communication, where I would figure out how to say something 100 different ways. And so whenever in real life somebody wasn't understanding what I was saying, I would try it again. And then I would try it again. And then I would say it a different way. And I was like, no, I got you. I'll cut them off before they try to jump in, because in my mind, I'm practicing. So analogies became like unlimited in my head. Like I can always use an analogy. I can like the way I share things is just like pictures in my head. So whenever I'm communicating with somebody, I'm going to find 100. Matter of fact, this happened with my mom the other day. Mom, bless her heart. My mom, in my mind, I'm like, yo, I know I'm communicating this clear. But for some reason, she won't get in it. And I was on like try number 15. But guess what? By try number 19, she got it. But that right there was a byproduct of the work I put in for years, because I understand that communication is very important. And so for a lot of people, they get frustrated, they quit, or they get disappointed and they just they get irritated, or they get angry, or they lash out, stuff like that. But the thing is, it's already yours, Christian, just receive it. So the thing is, by grace, by faith, just receive it. So the thing is and just start walking in it. Now watch this. The thing is, when we get frustrated in those moments, right? When we get frustrated in those moments and we resort to something else that is not communication, we're only hurting ourselves. So again, I'm to tie it all back in case I hope nobody's lost, but I'm gonna tie it back in. Based on what Donna and Sherika and Kari has expressed, when I'm communicating, I cannot sell myself short because of offense or rejection or emotional unavailability. I must communicate to the line and expect my spouse to come to the line with me. I cannot always cross into your side of the court. I cannot always fish for your communication or fish for your responses. So when it comes to keeping a record of wrong and holding unforgiveness hinders our communication. Because instead of communicating how we feel and communicating our needs, we end up communicating our frustrations in a passive-aggressive way, in a shaming type tactic. Does that make sense to everybody? And when we do that, it destroys our intimacy and our connection. I didn't know it was this late. So let's pause here. Let's open the floor for questions.
Pastor, can you just repeat that like one more time?
Which part?
The part when you were just talking about like the frustration is what's being communicated, not what actually needs to.
Correct. When I'm communicating, if I allow my feelings and frustrations and rejection and stuff to take over because of resentment or unforgiveness, instead of communicating my needs, my desires, my wants, my expectations, I'm going to communicate all the other stuff. My anger, my frustration. I'm going to throw passive aggressive stuff in there. I'm going to throw some shame in there. I'm going to try to make you feel bad, because all I'm doing is ignoring. All I'm doing is, let me say it this way. Hold on. First of all, I know I'm saying a lot. Did I repeat that well enough for you to catch that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. So really all I'm doing is, catch this, y'all. When I do that, all I'm doing is doing to me what my spouse did to me. So all I'm doing is hurting myself again by duplicating what they did. All I'm doing is setting myself up for more failure. You want to know why? Because oftentimes when we do this, you know what's going to happen, right? It's going to turn that small argument into a major conflict.